All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through a series of video presentations based on the PowerPoint slides for Murox HTML5 and CSS3 4th edition. All right, and these are slides from one of the two books that we're using for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1000 Web Development Technologies class. All right. The other book that I'll be going over the slides for these after I finish the ones I'm working on are Murox JavaScript and jQuery 3rd edition. But getting back to here, this book is 20 chapters in length. I've done presentations on the first 5 chapters. So I'm up to Chapter 6, which is the last of 3 straight lectures on CSS or cascading style sheets. This is on how to use CSS for page layout. So let's begin. As has been my credo, so to speak, I'm not going to sit there and read the objectives to you. In fact, I hate reading slides to you, period. I don't know about you, but I've been to enough meetings, seminars, etc., where the person giving the seminar, the meeting, or running the meeting, etc., reads after PowerPoint after PowerPoint after PowerPoint. All right, there's something new here. Actually, 2 things new on this slide. The first is you have not seen this aside tag probably earlier. All right, and this is a footer. The aside, here's a surprise, appears on the side. The footer typically appears at the bottom. There's an aside. Now, if you've ever seen a newspaper, and that's getting to be more and more rare today, but if you see a newspaper, and let's suppose that in a newspaper you see a headline article where firefighter saves baby, something like that. So that would be here. All right. Then along the side here, they have an article about the firefighter, how she or he has been on the job for this many years, their family, etc. So this is the important information, what's called typically tangential information. This is non-tangential. It's not as important. So you typically stick it off to the side. All right? And there would be your footer. Now, they're going to talk in here about how you can set up pages. You'll notice that we've got a header. First thing to notice is this is all of our content. It does not go to the ends here. So we've got some margin, some left margin, some right margin, and a little bit of top and bottom margin. Our header stretches out for the whole width, as does our footer. Our main content is taking up, what is that, maybe 65%, and the aside about 35%. This is a 2-column page with what are called fixed width columns. So regardless of how big or how small your screen size is, the main content will always take 65%. The aside will always take 35%. That's just estimates on my part. So they show you the CSS to do that. You'll notice that inside of your main, you've got your main stuff and you've got your aside stuff. There are a lot of ways that you can set this up. The key thing is 962 pixels. 600 of them, so about 2/3, are being taken up by your main content. 360, all right, so about 1/3, I mean, I know that's not exact calculations, are going to be taken up by the aside. So that's what you're going to have. Now, when you've got fixed column widths, they never change. They don't reapportion themselves. They always stay fixed. When you've got fluid column widths, they can get wider or narrower based on content. What's the big thing, the big takeaway there? When you have fixed widths, you use pixels or points, but typically pixels. When you have fluid, you use percentages. All right? Here's the 3-column format where you've got 2 sidebars. Again, you'll notice that the entire content does not take up the entire area that you have. In other words, you've got top, bottom, right, left margins. The header does take up that entire area, so does the footer. You've got sidebar A and sidebar B. Maybe each one of those sidebars are, I don't know, 15%, 20%, whatever it happens to be. But again, they're fixed width, so we're going to end up using, again, pixels in here. You can also use points, but virtually 100% of the time it'll be pixels. If you want to do this, so here's a home page with a sidebar that's floated to the right. It isn't mandatory when you do this to make it another color as they've done, but by doing that, you're really making it stand out. Notice also their footer makes a little bit more sense. So their footer has got a copyright symbol, copyright 2018, and it's right justified. The header has got an image in it that's been floated to the left. It's got an H1 tag, which has some some shadowing, it looks like, in it, and it's got a smaller tag, probably an H2. This would be your main content, your tangential content. This would be your aside, your non-tangential content. All right, so they show you this again, the HTML, and then they show you the CSS. And again, they are using pixels. Now, the CSS for the homepage part 2. Now they've got M's in here. You can mix these. The idea today, and we talked about this in one of the earliest lectures that I gave, are the fact that you should typically be thinking today about mobile first, or at least having mobile in the forefront as you're deciding what and how to do things. All right? So, oops, sorry about that. All right. So you can see it says a speaker page with a sidebar on the right. You might look at that and go, you know what, there's a lot of area here. That doesn't look good. Well, you could put other things there. All right. The primary CSS properties for creating text columns, you'll notice they all start with column. Column count, where you have the number you want. Gap, which is the area between. Rules, where you might put in things like, you know, again, for example, you might put in a border. And span, if you want something to span multiple columns. All right? Here's an example right there. So that's 3 columns, 35 pixel gaps. So there's gaps here, and 2 pixel rules. All right? So here they have changed it. If you notice, it's not the same content, but what we saw before, I guess it is. We saw this, where that's just 2 columns, and then we saw it again, where it's 3 columns. It's a better use of the area, probably looks a little bit nicer too. So they set the column count here to 2. For positioning elements, as it says, it's what you think. Top, bottom, left, right, and when you position things, by default, they're positioned statically. All right? It says here's a page that'll use positioning. Notice they've got relative positioning for the body, and they've got absolute positioning for the aside. It'll always be 30 pixels right, 50 pixels down, so it'll always be right here. Again, I've said this to you before. The only way that you'll learn how to use this is to play with it. Here's a sidebar with fixed positioning. So notice, even as you scroll down, it'll cover up what was there. This will never change where it's positioned. It's fixed. Position fixed. And right 0, meaning butting it up right against there, down 170 pixels from the top. Here's an example of a web page that's in a 3-column format. So you've got an aside on the left, and you've got a 2-column main content article on the right, and you have space between there. Again, when you look at this, here they just flipped it. All right. And again, draw your own conclusions. Some people would say, you know, I don't like this. There's too much area over here. There's ways you can change all that. What do I mean? Well, I could make this picture bigger. I could make the text in here smaller, etc. So there's a lot of different ways that this could end up being changed. Here we've got what? We've got 3 columns. There's a column, there's a column, and there's a column. So again, you'd probably say this is your main content, that's a sidebar, and that's a sidebar. Now that was unbelievably quick. It's probably one of the shorter presentations, 10 or 11 minutes in length. But again, as with much of the stuff that's in here, until you start to play with it, it's probably not going to make a boatload of sense. All right? So when I come back, I'm going to be going over Chapter 7. So we're going to go out of the realm of working with CSS, and we're going to talk about how to work with ordered and unordered lists, hyperlinks, and navigation menus. So I'll be building on one of those things that we have been working with. All right, we'll continue on with that. All right, so I'll be back with that soon.